Signs and portents, prophecies of doom. The supernatural is closely bound up with the story of Clan Mackenzie.
I'm in the grounds of Brahan Castle, once home to the Mackenzie Earls of Seaforth. The flames and music are part of the festival of Highland culture, celebrating 1,000 years of tradition.
The Mackenzies were once a mighty clan, but as their fortunes changed, they went from ruthless warlords to cash-strapped landlords. That decline mirrors the destruction of the clan system, which once governed every aspect of life here in the Highlands.
In this series, I'm on a personal journey to reveal the extraordinary and often bloody history of our Highland clans, and there can be few more eerily dramatic than the rise and fall of the Mackenzies. Of all clan castles, Eilean Donan is, for me, the most iconic. And it was here, on the shores of Loch Duich in Kintail, that the Mackenzie story really begins, when Coinneach MacCoinneach, Kenneth son of Kenneth, gave his name to the clan in the 13th century.
The Mackenzies were once the most powerful clan in the north of Scotland. They got to the top by acting as royal agents for a succession of Scottish kings, being in effect the monarchy's strongmen here in this part of the Highlands.
The growth of Mackenzie power nearly always came at the expense of other clans, but especially in the MacLeods of Lewis. In the 1600s, the MacLeods had made the island of Lewis almost ungovernable, and King James VI was desperate to pacify this turbulent part of his kingdom.
It really seems that James VI hated Gaelic culture. He saw Highlanders as mad, bad and barbarous, the very antithesis of civilised society. But because his court in Edinburgh was so far from the Highlands and Islands, he was forced to use a clan on the ground to help him exercise royal authority here. And there was no clan more ambitious or eager to lend a helping hand than the Mackenzies.
King James had tried to subdue the MacLeods by colonising them, but when this ended in bloody disaster, he invited the Mackenzies to pacify Lewis. The rewards were the rich fishing grounds and the whole island, if they could defeat the MacLeods. So it was with royal blessing that Chief Mackenzie of Kintail invaded Lewis with an army of 700 clansmen. Determined to grab MacLeod lands, he went on a bloody rampage.
The Blitzkrieg War, waged by the Mackenzies, forced the MacLeods to the island stronghold of Bursay. Now, they probably felt quite secure there, because Bursay had withstood many a siege in the past, but the Mackenzie clan chief was ruthless as well as cunning.
Not all the MacLeods had been able to reach the safety of the fortress. Mackenzie of Kintail now saw his opportunity. Straggling MacLeod women and children were herded together and rowed out to a rocky island not far from the fortress of Bursay, where they were abandoned to the incoming tide.
Of course, the MacLeods, you could see what was happening from their fortress, were now faced with a stark and a terrible choice. They could either abandon their position and save their loved ones, or they could watch them drown. And as the cries of their wives and their children grew louder and louder, they were really faced with no choice but to surrender to the Mackenzie chief, who now dominated the whole of Lewis.
With Lewis and its valuable fishery under their belts, the Mackenzies became the Earls of Seaforth. And it's as the Earls of Seaforth that they offered to take on another royal enemy, Satan. From now on, the Mackenzie story is increasingly bound up with the supernatural.
In the 16th century, Scotland was gripped by a fear of witchcraft. This was no doubt fueled by James VI's obsession with the supernatural. Now, he'd written a treatise on demonology, which no doubt explains why witch hunting became a surefire way of securing the king's favour.
In the shadow of Edinburgh Castle, where witches were once routinely burned, I met up with historian Louise Yeoman. I wanted to find out how the Mackenzies used the king's paranoia about witchcraft to further their own careers.
Louise, why were people so scared of witchcraft?
Well, because they believed in it. I mean, if you believe somebody could kill your children, afflict you with a hideous illness, reduce you to poverty, take away all your means of making a living, well, you'd be scared. And you'd want the authorities to do something about that.
But how were the Mackenzies able to exploit this fear in society?
Well, the same way as anyone else in the position of magistrate in a part of Scotland could. It was a way in which you could show yourself to be zealous for the king. Now, when they come into Lewis, we're in the reign of James VI and first, everyone associates him with witch hunting. But what they don't realise is witch hunting carries on into the reign of Charles I. And it's at that time the Mackenzies have their great money-making scheme. They're going to bring in the Dutch who do industrial scale fishing, and they're going to make lots of money from collaborating with them. And this puts Mackenzie in political hot water because the good burghers of Scotland do not want the Dutch coming in and stealing their fish.
Hoping to get out of this political hot water, the Mackenzies tried winning the king's support by persecuting witches. But there were other reasons for the Stornoway witch hunts.
There's another reason why, if you're wanting to make a lot of money out of a fishing station, you might go after witches. And that's because one of the main fears about witches was that they could sink ships, that they could raise storms, that they could raise winds. So you see, this might be why Mackenzie thinks it's worthwhile to go after these women. You don't want witches on the loose when you're trying to turn Stornoway into a sort of international fishing centre, do you?
So the Mackenzies were willing to burn witches to advance their business interests. But perversely, the clan became victims of the dark arts themselves when one of their own claimed supernatural powers. The next stage of my journey takes me back to Brahan Castle near Dingwall. For centuries, this was the eastern power base of the Mackenzie lords of Seaforth.
Not long after the Stornoway witch trial, another Mackenzie emerges from the obscurity of history, Coinneach Oa, or the Brahan Seer, whose prophecies are said to have foretold the end of the Mackenzie dynasty and the collapse of the Highland way of life.
The Brahan Seer, born Kenneth Mackenzie, spent most of his life on the clan estates here at Brahan. Andrew Matheson is a distant relative of the Mackenzies who came to fear the prophecies of the Brahan Seer.
He was consulted pretty widely by people who wanted to know what was going to happen. And the final thing, the pinnacle of his career, was when he was consulted by Lady Seaforth in Brahan Castle, which is where we're standing now. And she wanted to know something that was very important to her, and he eventually was persuaded to tell her, and that was his final downfall.
So what happened? What was he reluctant to tell her about?
Right, well, her husband was away, had been away for quite a long time, and he was having a wonderful time in Versailles, and Lady Seaforth was getting worried and frustrated and cross about his absence. So she called for the Brahan Seer and asked what he was doing. Well, the Brahan Seer spent a lot of time gazing through his stone and seeing the future. And he told her that this was where Lord Seaforth was, that he was surrounded by all the finery, by lots of lovely ladies, and misbehaving himself thoroughly. And she didn't like that. No woman would like to be told that. So she had him condemned as a witch, and was finally rolled down the hill at Fortrose in a barrel.